My monster of a family abused my two sisters. I went out of my way to get them out of there.
I saved my sisters from our monster of a family. I'm currently in custody of my two little sisters, and this is basically the story of how my family felt they were entitled to both of my sisters' bodies, and I wouldn't stand for that. The main part of the story takes place about a year ago. I'd moved out 6 years ago at the time and moved to another state for work and study. I was honestly really slack with keeping contact with my family, which is probably why this went on so long. When I do think back to the time before I moved out, I didn't treat Amy the best, and if I hadn't moved out and had so little contact with my family, I may have turned out just as entitled and as much of a horrible person. I came back to visit for a grandparent's birthday. After spending so long away, I spent the morning catching up with aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents, of course, and Liza. Now this was actually the first time I'd really realized the oddities of my family. Perhaps it was the change in environment. A few of my roommates had little sisters and whatnot after all, but it was the first time I'd noticed how quiet the little girls of my family were. I guess I'd always just thought of Amy as shy and quiet, but my little cousins were so much the same: polite, shy, quiet, and obedient, though at the time I brushed this off. After a few hours, I realized that Amy was nowhere to be seen all day. The party was at my parents' house, so this confused me, and I slipped inside to see if she was cooped up in her room like a lot of 16-yo would be, talking to friends or doing assessments. What I found is a memory that will haunt me forever. My oldest uncle on my father's side, laying over my sister, who was quite clearly in a lot of pain and struggling not to cry as he pinned her beneath him. I completely lost it, as any brother would, shouting at him to get off her and out of her room. I scared the hell out of both of them, but in that moment I was honestly ready to kill my uncle. Amy was pretty messed up in the head when I tried consoling her. She was covered in scares, had a rash that I later found out was an allergic reaction. She was allergic to strawberries. She didn't speak and looked at me as if she expected for me to hurt her too. Her room was dimly lit, the blinds taped closed to her wall. All the things she'd had when I left were gone, leaving her bedroom feeling cold and empty, and to add insult to injury, she was a month pregnant. When I demanded an explanation from my parents, they, paraphrasing, said that it was my uncle's right, and my father simply pointed out one of my 11-yo cousins sitting quietly with her parents and told me to have fun. I stormed off back to Amy's room, quietly packed her a bag of necessities, and managed to sneak her out of the house and into my car before doing the same with Liza. Part of me wanted to get all my cousins out too, but my main focus was of Amy right now, who sat trembling in the back of my car. I drove them both to the closest police station to report what was happening. I'll skip most the details of the legal battle that ensued, but my family did not take kindly to being outed for what they were doing. It was a tradition that spanned generations, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with tradition. Amy and Liza were put into temporary foster care. Amy was wreck. To her, everyone could and would hurt her, and I got reports every few hours that she was having a panic attack. 3 of my uncles went to jail for a very long time. I got a fair bit of money out of a range of family members, full custody of both Amy and Liza, no enforced visitation to their parents. My parents had to pay for any therapy costs, medication, and medical needs for both of them. My family was torn in two by this, many of my aunts leaving their husbands with their children after finally having the courage to follow me. Uncles who had married into the family took their wives, who had also been abused, and cut off ties. I still keep in contact with these members of my family, and I'm grateful for their support and glad that my cousins are safer now. Even some of the older guys who had been brought up thinking it was okay to treat women that way took themselves into counseling once they realized just how messed up it was. And I've had more than one instance where they admitted to hurting Amy and apologized, which I've accepted, as these cousins did their best to take their siblings or other cousins out of harmful environments. Now, I do believe some part of the ruling protected the younger men of the family, provided they see some form of mental health professional, as they grew up thinking that this was all normal, so they didn't end up in jail, but did end up on some list of possible sex offenders. Not entirely sure there. No one is sure who fathered Amy's child, but she had her pregnancy terminated, as we were told her physical and mental health would not cope with carrying a baby she ultimately would unlikely care for. She did consent at the time, and it was brought up by her psychologist once she was doing better, and she confirmed that she would have no love for the baby due to the circumstances which she fell pregnant. For 6 years, Amy had been physically, sexually, mentally, and emotionally abused in every way conceivable. This mostly came from my father's 4 brothers and brother-in-law who married into the family, My parents both stood by and let this happen, offering no support for Amy. During the case, my uncles argued it was their birthright being born into their family, and it was simply Amy's rite of passage before she was married off to one of my uncle's mates at 18. They used her allergy as a form of torture and manipulation, wanting her to be silent and obedient. They would press strawberries against her skin anytime she said a word, and force her to eat them when she stepped too far out of line. A lot of my aunts from my father's side admitted to enduring this treatment too, although most of them were lucky and didn't have allergies to exploit. I honestly can't even begin to explain everything that was wrong with Amy because of their behavior. Liza, for the most part, was okay. She needed a little therapy, as she was being groomed into compliance and taught that what she would experience was normal. But Amy had completely shut down. It took 2 months before I could even get her speaking. She trusts me now, and we often sit down, and I let her talk and open up about whatever she feels comfortable to. Her stories often have me struggling to hold back tears while I comfort her. I did get Amy a service dog a few months ago, tailored towards the emotional support she needs on a regular basis. Lickety Split, honestly, is the goodest of good doggos. She knows exactly when she's needed, and is a massive help when it comes to calming Amy's anxiety, especially in public. We've had more than one encounter with unrelated, entitled parents thinking they or their kid deserves her dog more than her. Let me know if you want these stories published too, because I've seen people like to read about service dog related incidents, but anyone who does think that can honestly fight me. No one deserves her dog more than her. On one occasion, one of my aunts, her husband went to jail, tried taking Lickety Split because their money paid for her. I told her if she ever comes near my property again, I would call the police, as there was a restraining order against her towards both my sisters. Later she came back and tried to poison Lickety Split with tainted meat, but one of my lovely neighbors caught her and chased her off. Police were called. She is now in jail too, after having to pay a fine and some money to me, because at this point, I'm pretty well acquainted in the legal system and sued her. My family still tried to get my sisters out of my care, reporting me for everything from animal abuse to drug trafficking. They planted drugs in an identical stuffed toy to Amy's comfort toy. A left it in the yard, but Amy would never do that, so I knew something was up immediately. Home security systems work wonders. I've actually become pretty chummy with the local police officers who have to inspect their claims, but they know I'd never do anything to endanger my custody over the girls. They mean the world to me. I will admit though, I have done things to hurt me, bond with them, yelling when stressed and throwing things from time to time, but I'm not perfect, and Amy has told me that although these moments do scare her, she doesn't feel endangered being near me when they happen. A few weeks ago, my mother contacted me saying she wanted to talk. I was hesitant, but agreed, and we met up in the next town over. No way I could be followed home. My mother explained how she was in the process of divorcing my father, and she wanted to have a relationship with me and my sisters, with emphasis on mending her bond with Amy, who had not called her mum in years. She explained how she was pressured into the marriage after she gotten pregnant with me and never wanted that life for her daughters. I flat out told her no, something several members of my family disagreed with, as she could have done literally anything to support Amy emotionally with what was happening, done anything to make her feel better or more secure with what was happening to her, but instead, she was shunned and isolated, except for when she was needed to cook, clean, or provide some sort of service to the family, even going as far as to berate her whenever she did try to confide in my mum that she was in pain or scared. Amy was well past her breaking point when I took her, and had even planned on killing herself less than a week after my visit. My mother argued that she had the same right as the other members of my family who had left and had contact with my sisters, but I told her it was because they were doing it to protect their children and themselves. They didn't wait a year after losing custody to try and fight for them, and I really don't even need to give a reason. I have custody and she does not. Members of AITA convinced me that when Amy is in a better place mentally and Liza is older, I bring it up with them. Leave the decision in their hands. I've been told Amy will be a dependent well after she turns 18. Her mind just doesn't function properly, so there is no risk of her mother getting into contact behind my back, even when she's an adult. And while Amy does have a phone and a computer, she doesn't have any social media, as she doesn't want any chance of her family trying to contact her, as they've threatened her with many forms of torture in the past. This story doesn't have a slam dunk ending. I have my sisters, and they're in a safe environment where they'll get to grow up as kids. Amy is getting the help she needs and is slowly making her way out of tower she built to protect herself in the only way she could, but she knows there isn't a rush to come out. I'll work with her at the pace she sets. She's still discovering her own interests, but quite like just reading a book with a form of fruity tea. She also has a small collection of stuffed animals, mostly Build-A-Bear. that she adores and takes one with her everywhere. She's sensitive to texture, so the feeling is a comfort for her. And once a week we sit down to try to find older bears she likes. We only have 3 Build-A-Bears on our wish list. And honestly, I've loved helping Amy discover herself. She lost a lot of her ability to think and feel for herself during this time, and watching her find her favorite book genre or her favorite types of music is a great feeling, knowing how far she's come. And I live for the days she actually manages a smile. I'd be willing to answer most questions, so if you want to know anything, just ask, as I want to bring awareness that these things are still happening to other kids, but obviously some things I'd rather keep to myself for the girls' sake. Update. First off, we're all doing great. Amy's therapy has been going well, and she's becoming more comfortable in social settings. She still has selective mutism, but it's been improving. She's now officially a completely healthy kid, in physical terms, having completed the last of her medical procedures and physio at the end of January, as she had a lot of issues with her bones initially, as well as being malnourished, but that's all fixed now. She's showing a lot more emotion and actively seeks out and shows affection towards those she trusts, and has far fewer nightmares than she did a few months ago. Amy still needs regular therapy, but her therapist has been praising her progress. Her schoolwork has also been going well. I've had a few people ask how Amy keeps up, and to put it simply, she doesn't. Amy's main focus at school is to learn to socialize. There is no pressure for her to keep up grades or do well in tests. That stuff can be worked on later. And even her teachers give her easier work, despite already being 2 years below her age-appropriate year. Liza is doing well in school too. She seems to have taken after me since she is very smart and near to the top of her grade. I'm very proud. Since my last update here, I've sat down with her and gone a bit more into detail what was happening when she was with her parents, as she started requesting to see them again. And if it were up to me, that would never ever happen. It's her right to make a choice once she's old enough. I'll slowly tell her more about what was happening, and not until she has the whole story will I let her choose if she wants to have supervised visits with her parent. I've finished my study for my field of work and got promoted pretty quickly once qualified, which allows me to work at home more often and been able to spend more time with my girls. For those who ask, yes, I do call them my girls. Why wouldn't I? I've also fixed a lot of my anger issues, and it's been quite a while since my last outburst. Some people I saw were concerned about that. We've also moved towards the end of September, and since we've had no negative confrontations with entitled parents, the girls still go to the same school, and our new house has a bigger backyard, which Lickety Split loves. She's doing very well too. That's about all the important information I can think of right now. Happy to answer more questions in the comments. Thank you everyone for the support, and I'll hopefully get around to the last story of entitled parents being entitled over Lickety Split soon. Message from Amy. Hi readers. I wanted to say thank you for being friendly and helpful with my brother and saying nice things to Liza and me. Potato would read them to us and tell us how many people wished us well, and it was very nice of everyone. Thank you for being nice, and I hope you all have a nice day or night. It's nighttime now, and I'm going to bed now.